Christian apologetics, evangelical apologetics, has a big Trump problem, and it is a growing problem. It started back in 2015 and 16 when evangelical apologists inexplicably began to jump on the Trump bandwagon. I remember in particular at that time Norman Geisler as one of the early adopters who normalized the acceptance of Donald Trump. You have the big Trump apologists today, people like Frank Turek. You also have people like Doug Groothuis, Rob Coons, William Lane Craig, who are supporting Donald Trump's administration to greater or lesser degrees. Most recently, as was just pointed out to me by Steve Hoffman, I became aware of Mike Licona as being a Trump supporter. This is so disheartening to me. I've known Mike not well, but I got to know him a little bit 15 years ago when I wrote an article in the Christian Post defending him during a particular controversy among conservative evangelicals. He reached out and thanked me for writing the article. And after that, we've had a few exchanges, always very positive. To see him now jumping on the Trump bandwagon is very disheartening. I mean, here we have an adjudicated sexual abuser, a convicted felon, a misogynist, a rapist, a racist, a narcissist, a failed businessman with six bankruptcies to his credit. I mean, he bankrupted casinos, someone who has a history of criminal behavior dating back to the 1970s. He had a university and a foundation that were both shut down by the government as fraudulent. He mocked a disabled reporter. He mocked a prisoner of war, mocking him for being captured, said he likes people who aren't captured. He is somebody who is consistently crass and vulgar. He famously or infamously said he's never had to apologize for anything. He's shown this incredible, deeply unsettling love for despots, whether it's Kim Jong-un or, of course, Vladimir Putin, Duterte, Orban, et cetera, et cetera. And he consistently antagonizes and alienates America's historic democratically elected allies. Canada, threatening to annex Canada, to attack Denmark and take the Panama Canal and Greenland, and the list goes on and on. So here you have Christian apologists who purport to be intelligent and wise people, and many of them, like Licona, are brilliant. And I'm wondering how can they support somebody so craven and inept as Donald Trump, and what that does to their witness, to their Christian witness. We are supposed to believe these are intelligent people about the historical resurrection of Jesus, the existence of God, the truth of Christianity, and yet they are falling for a garden variety huckster. Let's take a look at Mike Licona's tweet, and then I want to offer some further comments. So we begin with a tweet from a fellow named Carl Meta, and he posted a Twitter thread, or I guess a list of excretions, if you prefer that terminology. I prefer Twitter thread, analyzing Donald Trump and his cabinet meeting, which was, you know, presented live on television as well. And he praises Trump for his cabinet meeting and for the efficacy of his government. And Mike Licona, he retweets that and he says this is what competent governing looks like. See the entire thread. Mistakes will be made. Much success will occur too. Such a contrast from the previous, that is, Biden, Biden administration. So he's saying Biden was incompetent. Trump, his government embodies competence. This is just delusional. I want to just play a few couple clips, two or three, maybe four clips from this cabinet meeting and just offer some commentary along the way. And I want to begin with a clip of Donald Trump. And he's talking with Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, sitting alongside him.
Everyone at this table is doing an incredible job, by the way, I have to say.
Did you hear what he said? Everybody at the table is doing an incredible job. Right here is Pete Hegseth sitting beside Trump. 3 weeks ago, was it now? Hegseth was part of a massive security breach and scandal. So he was on an unsecured Signal chat using an app that you can download from the Play Store using this app with other people in the government, including Tulsi Gabbard, including Marco Rubio, including the vice president, and they're chatting using the Signal app unsecured, not in a skiff. They're chatting and texting about an impending strike against, I believe, it was the Houthis in Yemen. And Hegseth is texting, messaging on the Signal app, top secret information about the planned strike. Meanwhile, there is unwittingly, unknown to Hegseth, one of the other guys on the chat had invited by mistake a journalist from the Atlantic into the chat, and they're talking about Hegseth is disclosing top secret information on this chat. This kind of security breach is unimaginable in the previous administration. And yet here Trump praises Hegseth and everybody else in the room. The key to recognize is this. He's not praising Hegseth for competence. He's praising Hegseth for loyalty. What Donald Trump wants time and again from everybody is loyalty. If you're loyal to him, then as long as you are useful to him, he will keep you around. And that's the case with Hegseth. Maybe I'll say a word about tariffs. During the this meeting, Trump talked about how he's going to get a great deal from Xi Jinping from China. So let's just talk about the tariffs. So first of all, from a Canadian's perspective, in his first administration, Trump renegotiated NAFTA and he changed the name to the USMCA. And then he tore up the USMCA agreement in the last couple months. He ignored it and he imposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico. One of his rationales he initially gave for pairing it up with Canada was a fentanyl crisis, when less than 1% of the fentanyl coming to the US is coming across the Canadian border. Then he starts threatening about annexing Canada, which of course, I mean, is anti-democratic. And the paradox there would be that Trump is threatening to invade a NATO nation, which would oblige NATO to respond to Donald Trump's aggression. That's a whole nother problem right there. But once you start imposing tariffs willy-nilly ad hoc on different countries, that creates enormous problems because, of course, tariffs are a tax on the general population. Although Trump has consistently lied or is delusional about what tariffs are, he's falsely claimed tariffs are just paid by foreign governments, when in fact, the cost is passed on to consumers who then are taxed fundamentally. So, um, for as a result, the stock market doesn't like this. The stock market has lost trillions of dollars of value since Trump began threatening tariffs in January. And it began to really tank this week. And once the bond market started collapsing after Trump instituted his reciprocal tariffs, Trump panicked. And 14 hours later, he pulled those tariffs back, the reciprocal ones. He still kept all these other tariffs, including 145% tariff against China, which is incredible because most Trump merchandise is made in China. So that's all going to go up by, more than 100% in cost. Makes a lot of sense, right? Um, and then Trump, he bases his whole tariff framework on trade deficits. So in other words, if another country trades gets if they sell more to the US than they buy from the US, Trump penalizes them with a tariff. And this makes no sense economically. As one economist put it through an illustration, you have a trade deficit with your barber because you keep spending money at the barber shop, but the barber doesn't buy anything from you. But it doesn't mean that you are not benefiting from that trade deficit. You benefit in all sorts of other ways. And the United States benefits in all sorts of ways from countries with which it has a trade deficit. But Trump doesn't understand economics 101. And so he based his tariffs, his foolish tariffs, on trade deficits with other countries and penalized those countries for having trade deficits. And then he talks about how he's working toward a great deal with China. You want to know one of the things you don't do if you want to have a successful relationship with another country? You don't insult them. And just this week, J.D. Vance referred to the Chinese population as peasants. That has gone viral in China, and people are outraged, and understandably so. In the same way that Trump attacks and alienates all of his neighbors, he's now attacking and alienating China. Makes it that much more difficult to come to an agreeable economic settlement between these two countries. And the rest of the world is going to pay in an economic downturn and an impending recession. This is no business genius. Now, it is common knowledge that Donald Trump is a malignant narcissist. I think he exhibits psychopathic tendencies. As a narcissist, he needs to receive constant praise. And as a result, that's what you see everybody doing in this meeting is they are all acting as sycophants, giving him repeated praise. I'm going to play just one of the clips of one of these people in the meeting praising Trump.
First, we are, I would say, more than friends. We've all become family. And I think that what you have assembled in your vision is a turning point and an inflection point in American history. And so just being a part of that is the greatest honor. So thank you for that. And again, just the relationships here and the honor and respect we have for each other is a reflection of you and your leadership. So I just wanted to
Imagine that you'd been in a Biden um, cabinet meeting and everybody has to go around the room and say, Sir, I just want to say how amazing it is to be working for you, sir. You're so amazing. So thankful. And we all love one another and we love you so much, sir. Thank you. It reminds me of the same kind of thing as if you're watching a cabinet meeting in Pyongyang in North Korea and everybody has to praise the dear leader, or they're gonna face the repercussions, get sent off to a gulag. That's the kind of propagandistic sycophancy I'm feeling, the vibe that I'm getting. And watch the whole meeting. Watch how many people have to praise Donald Trump in order to feed his brittle ego. Okay, next up, I'm going to play a clip from Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. Whoops, hold on a second.
Had some great wins in the last few days that, you were overwhelmingly elected by the biggest majority. The U.S. Americans won.
So, first thing Pam Bondi just says Trump was elected by the biggest majority. This reminds me in January 2017 of Sean Spicer saying that Trump's inauguration, January 20th, had the largest crowd in history, which was false. And of course, this is false too. Trump was not elected by the largest majority in history. He got 49% of the vote. He didn't even get a majority of the population voting for him. But the fact that they have to lie and say bald-faced lies in order to stoke his malignant narcissistic ego is just very disturbing.
Want you to be president because of your agenda, and the courts are ruling that you have the authority to determine how the money of this country will be spent.
No, the courts did not give Trump the power of the purse. That belongs to Congress. But again, Pam Bondi is saying something manifestly false in order to stoke the man's ego.
That's what the American citizens wanted, and that's what they're getting. An example of that Friday was the Department of Education, that you can determine how the money will be spent. No more DEI. And
This is another thing that Pam Bondi, as Attorney General, has been really focused on attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you imagine, of all the things that the Attorney General and the Justice Department could be focusing on, they're focusing on attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within private institutions, corporations, etc. I mean, what a bizarre set of values. One other thing to add, during this cabinet meeting, Pam Bondi boasted that, in fact, anybody who vandalizes a Tesla will automatically get 20 years in prison. So if you beat police officers after you've broken into the Capitol building and you're carrying a noose and trying to hang Mike Pence, you get a full pardon from the government. But if you deface a Tesla, you get 20 years in prison. How's that for values? Pam Bondi then also boasts how the Justice Department is going to go after drug dealers. In his first week in office, Donald Trump pardoned Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the Silk Road. which was a black market online that included the selling of drugs. And it has been said that Ulbricht's impact on the global drug trade was equivalent to Pablo Escobar. When he was convicted in 2015, Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison, but Trump pardoned him, allowed him to go free because of his relationship with cryptocurrency. And Trump has his own cryptocurrency that he's promoting to make money, like Trump bucks or whatever they're called. So the hypocrisy to talk about you're going after drug dealers and you pardon Ross Ulbricht, that is the moral incoherence of this administration. Well, there's a few other things we could talk about. Maybe I'll just say a word. So they have the Health and Human Services head, Robert F. Kennedy, where he boasts about how he's going to get hundreds of scientists to study the cause of autism. And he says by September, we'll know what the cause of autism is. Okay. What he's doing there is he's reflecting his anti-vax sentiments, which have linked autism to vaccines, to accredited junk science. He's also criticized the MMR vaccine. And as a result of the dangerous rhetoric of people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the measles outbreak, measles was eradicated in the United States back in the year 2000. It is coming back now with whirlwind force. Two children have died. Hundreds of people have been infected. This is one of the most spreadable viruses known to human beings, known to humanity. And the US government just shut down places to get the vaccine in Texas, which is the hotbed of this spread, because of budget cuts as a result of Doge. I mean, I could go on all day. It is this government is defined by ineptitude and by criminality or by un, utterly unethical actions. Here's one example, one more example. Just in actually maybe two examples. So first of all, just a couple days ago, Donald Trump gave a directive that his government is going to investigate Miles Taylor, who was a whistleblower in the first administration, Trump administration, and wrote a book, which Trump presents, and also Chris Krebs. Let me just pull up the info on Chris Krebs. So Chris Krebs was the former, during the first Trump administration, the United States Director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He worked for Trump in his first administration. And after the 2020 election, Krebs said the 2020 election was the most secure election in history, which is a fact. And it was simply reflecting what he was supposed to do as director of cybersecurity and infrastructure. Trump never forgave him because Trump has continued to spread the lie that, in fact, the election was rigged. And as a result, this week he directed his government to investigate Chris Krebs. This is banana republic stuff. This is what an authoritarian state does. They investigate people like Miles Taylor and Chris Krebs. And what that does is it says to anybody else, if you step out of line, we will send the government after you as well. I don't know if you know this, but a growing number of law firms in the United States, in places like Washington, D.C., are making agreements with the Trump administration to do pro bono legal work for them so that they won't be investigated by the Trump government, simply because they represented clients that had interests against the Trump government. Again, this is banana republic stuff. Now, may the last thing I'm just going to say, just this week, in fact, last night, the US Supreme Court, which of course has six conservative justices of nine, they voted 9-0 um, against the Trump government because the Trump government sent a man without trial to El Salvador to a prison, claiming he was an MS-13 gang member. They then admitted that he was not, but they refused to return him from that prison to his family, even admitting he's not guilty of anything, but they have refused to return him. And Justice Sotomayor, in a supplemental statement to the 9-0 finding of the US Supreme Court against the Trump government for doing that, said that he pointed out if the Trump government can do that This man who was a permanent resident in the US, originally from, I believe, El Salvador, if they can do that to him, they can do that to anybody. They can take anybody and send them to a foreign prison without trial, without a hearing, simply because they want to. That is the level of dangerous corruption and authoritarianism that the US government is in right now. So I return finally to the words of Mike Licona in his tweet. He says, "This is what competent governing looks like. Such a contrast from the previous administration." He apparently can see nothing of the ineptitude, the corruption, evident criminality, the incipient growing authoritarianism of this government. He's just like all of these other apologists. And again, I conclude with this. If you cannot trust these people, if they're going to become slaves to confirmation bias, to political partisanship, the utter folly in supporting a man this inept and unethical, why would you believe them about the historical Jesus or the existence of God or the truth generally of Christianity? If you can be that fundamentally wrong about one thing this important, why should anybody trust you about anything else? And that is the problem, or one of the problems, of contemporary evangelical apologetics, which sadly now includes Mike Licona as part of that problem.